World News Today.
And only you can decide what you want this country to be, what you want to do with the future.
Just call me Snake Eyes.
Vote like your whole world depended on it.
Voters should not be forced to go to the polls with their fingers crossed.
They understand what peace demands.
What America needs are leaders to match the greatness of her people.
Campaign appearances are getting closer and closer together as each candidate tries to get in his best shot.
Vote. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
It's going to get dirtier in these last few days.
No apologies, no regrets. We will not be coerced. We will not tolerate being pushed around.
So Happy New Year. How you feeling? Anybody nervous? It's an election year, of course, you knew that. And I don't know how you're feeling about that, but we're kicking off the year. We just thought it would be fun. It'd be fun to kick off the year with a two-part series, which for some of you is 2 weeks too many, and for some of you, it's 50 weeks too short. It's like, we should just talk about this all year long, called Avoiding Election Infection, and we are bringing together everybody's two favorite topics, politics and religion. Now, as a pastor, I find it pretty difficult to steer away from the topic of religion in church. But I have often tried to steer around, at least directly, the topic of politics in church. And for some of you, you're really glad that I do, maybe for good reason, because throughout history, really, when religion has gotten into bed with politics and with political power, or when people have leveraged religion to fuel political agendas, it has gone badly, usually for both the politics and the religion. So yes, please, you might say, can we keep our politics and our religion separate? If for no other reason than it's just uncomfortable, so as not to be divisive, because, and you know this, nothing divides like politics. And it's just gotten worse in this past generation for anybody old enough to kind of remember that. In fact, there was an article a little while ago, an article called In America, Politics is the New Religion. Politics is the New Religion, where Ashley Landrum, a scholar researcher from Texas Tech, she says in 1960, check this out, only 5% of Americans said that they would be displeased if their son or daughter married someone of a different political party. Only 5% of Americans said that would upset them if their son or daughter married someone of a different political party, but the majority would say they would be very concerned if their son or daughter married someone of a different faith, a different religious perspective, a different view of God, which rarely happened. Fast forward 50 years, 2010, 40% of Americans said they would be upset if their child married someone of a different political party, but the majority were not very concerned at all if they married someone of a different faith or a different view of God or a different religion. And her point in the article is, we used to prioritize spiritual and faith and religious ideals or religious values over our political values and political ideals, but now increasingly, partisan political values win. And in fact, she goes on to say, and this is actually really true. In fact, it's true even around here that when people are caught between their church, even this church, when people are caught between their church and their political ideals or their political party, they end up defaulting to their political party. It's really, really true. We've seen it happen over and over again. Nothing divides like politics, because I think really nothing divides like fear. Nothing really divides like fear, and here's the deal, like, you know this, you cannot raise a whole lot of money peddling understanding and nuance. Like, this is a complex issue, we should probably talk it through and understand both sides. You're not getting anywhere with that horse. But you can raise a lot of money peddling division and fear, and both parties are going to do a whole lot of that over the next few months, and it's toxic and it is infectious and not in a good way. And so, yes, please, let's keep our religion and our politics separate, can we? And yet, Jesus, as it turns out, was very, very political. In fact, you probably know this. If you don't, you need to know this. Jesus was not executed for his religion. Jesus was not executed for being religious or for his private personal morality or piety. He was executed because he was seen as a threat to the political establishments of temple and empire, the political establishments of his day, because he was political. If politics is all about how societies are governed and ordered, which is what politics is about. Just look it up. That's what politics is about. How societies are governed and ordered, how power is gained and wielded. If politics is all about how we live together, how we function together, how we deal with offenses and offenders, with enemies and violence, how we handle money and wealth and poverty, how we care for those who are easily overlooked or left behind. Excuse me. If that's what politics is about, then it is clear. Jesus was very, very political. Pretty much everything he said had political ramifications, if that's what politics is. And Jesus came to establish an alternative politic, an alternative political view, if you will, an alternative view not of God or of religion or of personal piety or vertical morality, but an alternative view of the good life, of what it means to be human and how human life is designed to flourish both as individuals and as communities. And the powers that be understood, and they understood correctly. If this thing takes off, if this Jesus guy and what he's doing takes off, this will uproot and undermine what gives us power, and it did. Jesus had a political point of view that was very, very threatening. It was threatening then. It was threatening to the various political parties and factions of his day. And I think if followers of Jesus were to embrace this, and I speak to myself as much as anything, if we were to embrace his point of view thoroughly today, it would be threatening again. So this election year, as we're kicking off this short, just two-part series, I want to kick it off with a question. And this question is really designed for you if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus. So if you don't consider yourself a follower of Jesus, you get to kind of fold your hands and look at me and go like, I do not think so, Buster. But if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, I want to start this new year challenging you with this question right here. Are you willing to evaluate your politics and political ideas and views through the filter of Jesus rather than create a version of Jesus that supports your politics? Are you willing, just willing, not necessarily will you do it, but are you willing at least to evaluate your political points of view through the filter of Jesus, of who Jesus is and was, his life, his teaching, his death and resurrection, to filter how you think about politics through Jesus rather than create a version of Jesus that supports your politics, which people have been doing for millennia and still do today. In fact, you might be sitting here thinking, well, duh, the reason why I am a fill in the blank is because of Jesus. Hello, the reason why I am a Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or great, or like whatever you might be, or independent or none, is because of Jesus, right? Like some people I know of a more conservative bent are absolutely convinced that if Jesus were alive today, he would be an American. What else would he be? He would be an American and he would be a Republican. How else would he vote? And then I have some friends who are more liberal progressive persuasion who are really kind of confused how anyone can even be a Christian and vote Republican. Have you not read what Jesus said about the poor or the disenfranchised or how he healed people? I mean, Jesus was a free healthcare dispensing machine. It's obvious. I mean, isn't it just so obvious? And when you interpret Jesus through your own political filter, it is obvious, and it's amazing. Jesus is red. Jesus is blue. It's amazing how much he is just like you. It's amazing, right? But, and get this, in fact, if you've tuned me out or if I've already offended you, chances might be that I already have. Dial back in for just a second, because here's where we're going today, and really this is kind of the nuts and bolts of the whole series. If you want to know what the point is, it's really just this. Jesus didn't come to take sides. He came to take over. Jesus didn't come to take sides. He came to take over. And there is a great story from Jesus' life that illustrates this. But to get at this, I want to set up the political landscape of Jesus' world. There were a number of different political and religious parties in the land. In fact, in the ancient world, all politics were religious and all religion was political. And there were a number of different parties and factions operating at the time. Of course, the big dog was Rome and the Roman Empire and their armies. They occupied the nation of Israel by force at threat of violence and crucifixion. They ruled militarily, and they were maybe the big dog on campus, if you will. But then you may have heard of this group before, well-known group, political group, was known as the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees represented a conservative religious movement, if you will. They believed, in fact, some rabbis actually taught that if all of Israel were to fully obey Torah, God's law, fully, just one day, he would send the Messiah and they would be delivered from the Romans. Now, that was an extreme, maybe hyperbolic point of view, but the idea was if we would just obey God, he would send the Messiah and deliver us from the Romans. And so they were highly nationalistic and they opposed the Romans, but non-violently. They wanted to see God intervene through their obedience, and they held very little political power, almost none whatsoever, but they held huge influential or popular power. And then there's a third group that you may have heard less of, known as the Sadducees. The Sadducees were very politically powerful. In fact, they were the aristocracy. They had control over Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem, which they had built and developed into big business in the last generation before Jesus. They were the priests, especially the high priest. They were wealthy, powerful, elitist, entrenched. And though to the people, they were nationalistic and pro-people, they actually depended entirely on the Romans for their power and for their political position. And so they are actually very much in support of the status quo and keeping things the way they are. Then there's a fourth group that you may not have heard that much of, known as the Herodians, named after Herod, the puppet king, the Jewish puppet king who was installed by the Romans to rule certain parts of Israel administratively. And they governed day-to-day operations in huge portions of like Galilee and so forth. And the Herodians refers to the people who worked in this administration, and they are entirely pro-Roman. They're entirely pro-Roman, pro-power. They're, for the most part, irreligious, though superficially religious, for the most part irreligious. And then there's one last group, and you may or may not have heard of them, and that's the Zealots. Now, the Zealots are this uber nationalistic, very anti-Roman terrorist movement or freedom fighter movement, whichever one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And if the Pharisees wanted to see God intervene by the way they obeyed Torah, the Zealots were not willing to wait around. They were going to kickstart the revolution themselves. And so they would attack and kill Roman cohorts if they found them wandering, and like if they found them, and they would actually attack and kill at times some of the aristocracy of the Sadducees. And so you have all of these going on. Quick side note. Jesus actually had a little bit of all of them in his life group. Yeah, he did. He actually intentionally picked people from these very extreme points of view. I always chuckle when I think, like his life group, when they first started getting together, like nobody closed their eyes during prayer. Like you get to the end of the group, hey, any prayer requests? Like everybody's just like, because these people do not trust each other. And that's who Jesus gathers around. And if you've ever felt like leaving a life group over politics, you might not have been a very good follower of Jesus, because that's what, anyway, side note, I don't know. That's probably not true. Maybe. So back to our story. It's the final week of Jesus' life, and they're in Jerusalem, which is like the center of everything, and all these groups are there. It's the week of Passover, which is significant because Passover is like their Independence Day, and it's a whole week-long festival. And so at this week, like nationalistic fervor is just at its peak, and Jesus had entered the city a couple of days ago riding on a donkey, which was a very political move because there was this oracle from the ancient prophet that said the Messiah would come riding on a donkey. Is like, what is he doing? And they're waving palm branches, also very political. It's kind of like their national flag. They're waving palm branches, and they're speaking of Jesus as if he's the Messiah, which is a political title. And so everything's just really amped up, and the wheels have already, at this point in the story, been set in motion to kill him. When Matthew, one of Jesus' eyewitness close followers, records that then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. And they sent some of their disciples along with some of the Herodians. Now, people at the time probably would have thought, and anyone who knew what was up reading Matthew's story of Jesus would have thought, like, what? Wait a minute. The Pharisees are partnering with the Herodians? Like, these two groups, they don't get along for nothing, for nobody. They are political opposites. It's a little bit like MSNBC and Fox News getting together to unseat some up-and-coming politicians. Like, what did she do to offend these two extremes, right? And so they've come together, and they've come together because Jesus is a threat, and he's a threat to both of them. He's a threat to all of them. And they approach Jesus publicly because they want to catch him publicly in a gotcha moment. And so here's what they say to him. They come to him and they go like, teacher, rabbi, I love this. This is so good. We know that you are a man of integrity. You are a man of integrity, and you teach the way of God in accordance with truth. Oh, yeah. You aren't swayed by others. You don't care who they are or what they could do to you. You pay no attention to any of that. And so we know you are going to answer our question without any consideration of who might be listening and who might be watching and who might be recording this next, because you are a straight shooter. And isn't that what we want? We want straight shooters. He's a straight shooter. So tell us then, what's your opinion? I love this. Like, we're just curious because we were over there and we're trying to sort something out. And then we saw you and we thought maybe you would have an opinion. What's your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar, to the empire, or not? Is it right to pay this tax that we all have to pay to the empire who conquered our nation, who despises our people, who defies our God and all their pagan gods, and we're supporting that financially? Is it right to support that financially? Is that right? Is that the righteous thing to do? Ooh, it's a trap. And it's a good one, because if Jesus says yes, that is right, he'll be seen by the people as somebody who supports the empire and the hated taxes that they have to pay. And he is going to lose support because that is not a popular position at all. But if he says, no, it's not right to pay the tax, he is going to be seen as somebody who opposes the empire. And that might not be a popular position to take. That might be the popular position to take. But to the Herodians, with them there, that's a dangerous position to take. That's a potentially deadly position to take. And so they're like, quit waffling, Jesus. You need to come out like pro-empire or anti-empire. Like, choose sides between us, between the Pharisees and the Herodians. Are you for us or are you for them? Our party or their party, right or left, red or blue? Jesus, it's time for you to take sides. But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, which probably wasn't too difficult to know. I don't know that requires a whole lot of prophetic acumen to be able to go, you guys are really devious, right? So he kind of sees the flattery's blatant, he sees the whole thing. He says, you hypocrites, you're so duplicitous, scheming like this. Why are you trying to trap me? And this is so good. There's so much going on in the story. He says, show me the coin that's used for paying the tax, because apparently he doesn't have one. Apparently he's not carrying any of these coins. And so they fish around and someone brings out a denarius, which is the Roman coin that was used to pay the imperial tax. And he asks them as they're holding it out, hey, whose image is on that? Hey, you're looking at a coin. Whose image? Very important word. Whose image? Whose image is on the coin and whose inscription? Now, this particular coin would have had the image of Tiberius Caesar, and the inscription around Tiberius Caesar's image was Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus, because Tiberius' stepfather, Augustus Caesar, had been voted by the Senate to be a god when he died, which made Tiberius the son of God. He was the son of God, and he put it on all his coins. In fact, it was his preferred title. Just call me son of God. And then when you flip the coin over, it has written on it, Pontiff Maxim, which means high priest. The Caesar was the high priest of Rome. And there's an image, again, of the goddess Pax reclining on a throne. And so it's this pagan imagery, like whose image, whose inscription. And there is a deep irony in this moment that we could easily miss, because the Jewish people, particularly in Jerusalem, and especially the Pharisees, opposed any images at all. any images whatsoever, not in their homes, not in their city, definitely not in their temple. In fact, just a couple of years before this scene, the Roman governor Pilate, who you've probably heard of, tried to bring some military flags into the city of Jerusalem that bore the emperor's image on the flags. And when people found out about this, there was such an uproar that thousands of Jewish men showed up in the courtyard in front of the Roman barracks, knelt down and bared their necks, asking to be beheaded if they would not remove those flags from the city. They would rather die than allow those images of Caesar in their city. And here they are walking around with them in their pockets. And Jesus does this all the time. He's just uncovering. He's just exposing the duplicity that is so easy to have in our lives. And I love that about him, except then I think, how would I feel if he did that to me? Because he would, because he loves all of us too much to let us live with our lives, right? And so he's just uncovering, like, let me see that coin. Oh, that's interesting. What's that image there? What's that inscription? And then he gives them the coin back and he says to them, so give back to Caesar what's Caesar's. Give back to him. It's got his image on him. It's got his image. In fact, literally by law, all of these coins were considered the property of Tiberius Caesar, and we just used them to do business, but they actually all belonged to him. That was kind of how the law worked. Give it back to him. Who cares? Who cares what's money? I don't know. Just give back to Caesar what's Caesar's. And here's the hook, and it's so good. Give to God what is God's. In other words, give back to Caesar what's his. It's got his image. You just give it back to him. But you, whose image do you bear? Whose image do you have on you? Then you give to God what's God's and only God's. Yourself, your life, your body, your ambitions, including your political ambitions, your true allegiance, your true loyalty. That's God's, and that's God's alone. So you don't give to Caesar what's God's. You give to God what's God's, and only to him. And it was genius. It was a genius move, and they knew it. And so Matthew, who, by the way, was a tax collector in his former life before he started following Jesus, so he's got to be just loving this whole scene. When they heard it, Matthew tells us, they were amazed. I bet they were. And they just kind of turned and walk away, and I bet they're wondering to themselves, why did we even ask him that stupid question? And whose idea was it? Now, Jesus' point, you know this, wasn't just religious. It was not a point to be made about your personal, private, spiritual life, and it certainly wasn't just financial. This is not tax advice from your CPA. His point was political. It is a political question. It is a question about choosing sides, and Jesus' answer is a political answer. He had not come to take sides in their disagreement. He had come to take over. He had come to offer and to model and to inaugurate an alternative politic, an alternative way of being together in the world, an alternative way of even seeing the world, an alternative kingdom. And it began at the very beginning. Matthew, who tells this story, introduces us to Jesus with this kind of weird, interesting scene that you might be familiar with, where Jesus is being tempted in the desert. It's like, what is going on? This kind of weird scene. Why is this happening? And it's mirroring, on the one hand, Israel's struggle in the desert. So there's a lot going on in the story. But the temptations themselves actually set up the story of Jesus. And they are, once again, very political. Jesus is being tempted with power. That's what he's been tempted with. He's been tempted with power to gain and exercise power in his own self-interest, to establish himself as the Messiah without suffering and pain, and to actually, in the words of one of the temptations, to rule over all the kingdoms of the world. To rule over, that's a political position, over all the kingdoms of this world, which, incidentally, that job actually belonged to someone else at the time. His name was Tiberius Caesar. And the implication of the story is that's where the Roman Empire's power came from, and I can give it to you. And so there's all this going on in the story, but Jesus refuses. He will have nothing to do with it. And from the opening scene, it is clear. He has come to establish a different way. A different way. And he emerges from the wilderness proclaiming this message. And Matthew and Mark, particularly in their two biographies of Jesus, they summarize Jesus' entire message with this simple line. Here was Jesus' message as he comes out of the desert. The time has come. It's here. Like everybody, tune in. It is time. The kingdom of God has come near. There is another kingdom. There is another country, if you will. And it doesn't operate against or in place of the kingdoms or countries of this world, but within and around and above them. And its citizens are not bound by geographical borders or by their ethnicity or language or color, but by their love and allegiance to the king. There is a kingdom, and it is near, and it is this completely different kind of kingdom. It's an inverted kingdom where the king gives his life for his subjects, where the first in line willingly give up their position and take last place so the last in line can go first, where power is leveraged for the powerless, and wealth is leveraged for the poor, and influence is leveraged for the voiceless. It's this kingdom where everything is opposite. Everything is different from the way it is here, and therefore anyone who wants to join this kingdom has to repent, has to change. Like, change what? What do I need to change? Well, pretty much everything. Pretty much everything from the way you see and the way you think and the way you approach life to where you're going, where you're headed, like what you value, what you assume. You're going to have to change everything because this kingdom is the other way around. The kingdom of God is near. So repent, so change, and embrace something that's really, really good news for everybody. That's the kingdom. That's the country that Jesus came announcing. And everything Jesus does and refuses to do, and everything he teaches illustrates and communicates and demonstrates that kingdom, that alternative politic. Fast forward to the end of the story. It's just a few days after that whole show me the coin, taxes, give to Caesar whole thing. It's a few days after that, and Jesus has now been arrested by the Sadducees, by the temple elite, the aristocracy, the political religious powers in the city that controlled Jerusalem. He's been beaten terribly. He's been dragged through trials all night. Early the next morning, on what we call Good Friday, they take him to the Roman governor Pilate because Rome had taken away from them their power or ability to execute anyone. So if they wanted to kill someone, they had to go through Pilate. And so they need him to pass some kind of capital sentence against Jesus so they can have Jesus executed. But there is so much animosity and so much mutual hatred between these two groups, the Sadducees, the priestly class, and Pilate. And so John describes this scene that takes place. And from everything we know about history, it's just so accurate. There's this cat and mouse thing that's going on. And finally, Pilate's fed up, which is not surprising. And he goes back inside his house and takes Jesus with him where the priests refuse to go because his house is unclean. His house is unclean. We want you to kill a guy, but we can't go in your house because that would be dirty, and we don't want to make God mad. So that's what religion does. Often it just draws these really strange lines, right? And so he takes Jesus back inside with him because he knows it's going to tick them off. And so they're left outside going, what are they doing in there? Because they won't come inside. And that's when Pilate asks Jesus directly, so are you the king of the Jews? Are you the Messiah? Again, a political question. It's a political question. Are you a threat? I need to know, are you a threat? Because a king, even a wannabe king, even a king pretender, is a threat to the empire and to the emperor. Are you a threat? Are you a king? Are you the Messiah? And Jesus responds. Well, first he responds by not answering the question, very typical of Jesus, asking his own question, and there's an interesting little exchange that happens there. But then he cycles back around to this question, and here's his answer to it. My kingdom is not of or from this world. My kingdom is not of or from this world. I am a king, but not like that. I'm a king, but not the way you think. I'm a king, but not just the king of the Jews per se. See, when you frame the question like that, you're misunderstanding the nature of my country, of my kingdom. You're assuming that it's just like every other kingdom on this planet that you've ever known, a geographic nation state with geographical ethnic borders to be fought over and defended, advanced by violence and force, kind of like your kingdom, Pilate, but it's not. In fact, if it was like it, my followers, my subjects, would be fighting right now, but my kingdom isn't like that. So my subjects don't fight. Hello, like that. My kingdom is not of or from or in any way like the kingdoms of this world. See, now, my kingdom, I love this line, is not from this place. Or literally the phrase is, it's not from this side. My kingdom is not from this side. My kingdom isn't from this side. And on the other side, Pilate, on the other side, everything is different. Everything is different than the way it is here. See, Jesus did not come to take sides in our tiny little temporary upside down kingdoms. He didn't come to take our side. He came to be king. He came to become a king to establish a whole new country that doesn't exist against or in place of, but within and around and above the kingdoms of this world, a kingdom that will eventually sit in judgment on all of the kingdoms of this world, including ours. He did not come to take sides in our kingdoms. He's inviting us to take sides with him. He's inviting us to take sides with him in his kingdom. The time has come. The time has come. God's kingdom, God's country has come near. The borders are open. Immigration and citizenship is now available to all. So change pretty much everything and join me in my kingdom. Join me, immigrate to my kingdom because my kingdom is good news. And to decide to follow Jesus as your Messiah or your king is, politically speaking, a decision to immigrate. A decision to immigrate. In fact, baptism, you might say, is our citizenship celebration. In fact, if you haven't been baptized as a follower of Jesus, we have baptisms coming up in just a couple of Sundays. Like, it's time. Let's go. It's time for you maybe to say, I am in. Like, I am going to follow Jesus and I am a part of his kingdom. And baptism is that kingdom, that citizenship celebration. And communion is our pledge of allegiance. It's a pledge of allegiance to the crucified, anointed king whose suffering love overcame and will ultimately completely overcome all powers of darkness and death, and a pledge to his right side up kingdom in this upside down world. Communion is our pledge of allegiance. Now, this means all kinds of important things for our politics. That he hasn't come to take sides with us. He's inviting us to take our side with him. It has all kinds of important implications for the politics of those who claim to follow him as our king and to belong to that kingdom. For one, it means clearly that his kingdom cannot be equated with any kingdom that's in this world or of this world. Not Israel. Shockingly, the Messiah is not just the king of the Jews, but more than that. It can't be equated with that. That's not his kingdom. Not later to come, the Holy Roman Empire, not his kingdom. Not much later, England or Germany or Spain or France. And by the way, not the United States of America. It's not his kingdom. His kingdom transcends all of the political and geographic and ethnic borders of the kingdoms of our world, of our geopolitical nation states. And it means that it can't ever be equated to or limited to any one of our kingdoms. And it also means that belonging to his kingdom is to be a citizen of a kingdom that is not of this world. It is to belong to a kingdom that has its own politic, its own way of ordering and structuring things that is so often the opposite of the way things are here. And if we identify first and foremost as citizens of that kingdom, embracing that country's constitution, if you will, as our own, then what that implies is that we live here in this kingdom really as expats. That's what we are. You know what that word means? It's like we're immigrants. We're expats. The first followers of Jesus, here's the phrase they used. We are foreigners and aliens here. That's their political identity. That's how they saw themselves. We are foreigners and aliens in this world because we belong to a different country, which raises, I think, important questions about what might be called our dual citizenship. Like, hey, what does that mean to be dual citizens? What does that mean for us and for our engagement here as citizens of one of this worldly kinds of countries? Like, how do we balance that? And that's a great question. That's a really important question. I think you would agree. And the answer is, don't miss part 2 of Avoiding Election Infection next week, because that is what we're going to talk about. But I want to end today by taking us back to that story that Jesus told. Have you given to God what's God's? Have you done that? Because you have his image on you. You have his image on you. You were made in his image to bear his image in this world. Have you given your whole allegiance to God, including your political allegiance, wherever that might end up leading you, saying this belongs to you and it does not belong to anyone else? Or perchance, have you given to Caesar or to Biden or to Trump or to Republicans, or to Democrats, or to the red or the blue, or even to the United States of America? Have you given to Caesar what is God's and God's alone? Have you given to God what's God's? And today, Jesus is inviting every single one of us to take sides with him, to join him in his kingdom, to immigrate to his side, and to like change and believe the good news, to embrace a very different way of being together that will be uncomfortable and upsetting and inverted to everything we knew, a whole new way of seeing our relationships, our world, our politics, our political parties, and everything else as well. A way of following Jesus in this world that is not of this world, as citizens of another kingdom. And Jesus would say, I know you want me to take sides in your kingdom. I know you do. I understand. I know you want me to take your side in your kingdom. But will you join me in mine? Will you come to my side? Will you join me in my kingdom? And this new year, as we kick off a new year, is a perfect time for you, for all of us to make that decision. And so I want to ask us real quickly to bow our heads, close our eyes, maybe take a second in prayer as we begin a new year. And maybe if that's where you're at, maybe you've even done this kind of thing before, but not quite like this, to pray a simple prayer that says, Jesus, I want to join you in your kingdom. Just tell him that. I want to join you in your kingdom. I want to immigrate, okay? I want to immigrate. I want to move my loyalty, my pledge of allegiance, my heart, my soul, my mind, my strength. I want to immigrate to your kingdom. So today I'm giving you what's yours. I've got your image on me. I'm giving what belongs to you. I surrender myself. Just tell him that. Breathe deep. I surrender myself, my life, my future, all of my ultimate allegiances. I surrender them to you. I surrendered them to your kingdom. Forgive me. Forgive me completely. Forgive me for all of the ways that I've contributed to what's so upside down and messed up in this world. Today, I embrace your right side up kingdom, and I embrace you as my king. And I will follow you this year in every facet of my life. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, hey, thank you again so much for joining us on a brand new New Year weekend for this series. As you're heading out, I just want to remind you a couple of things. Lyle and Daniel were talking to you about those Connect cards. We'd love to hear from you, especially as we head into a new year. Sometimes this is great to just hear from everybody and get updated on cell phones and email addresses and all of that. So even if you have filled out one of these before as we're going into a new year, it'd be great to just hear from you fresh. Fill one of those out that you have. You can also fill it out on the app. And then, of course, as you're heading out, you can drop those in the offering baskets on your way out. By the way, if you have not been baptized and you are ready to align your allegiance with his kingdom, like put baptize me somewhere on that Connect card. Just write that somewhere on that card. We'd love to be a part of baptizing you in a couple weeks, Sunday the 21st, that is. And don't forget to fill out and drop in your Spring Life Group brochures. If you already know which group you're signing up, you maybe already started filling that out. You can drop that whole brochure in there, or you can take it home and sign up online, and love to have you join our life groups. You can also drop our offering envelopes in the offering baskets too. Of course, that makes sense. And excited about starting a new year strong. So, hey, God bless you. Hope to see you back next weekend as we wrap up with part 2 of Avoiding Election Infection, Dual Citizenship. Have a great week. We'll see you back next weekend.